Andrew Griffiths, welcome to the Hidden Why podcast. So glad to have you here.
Thank you, Lee. Fabulous to be here. Looking forward to having a chat.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate your time. I listened to your audio book. Someone has to be the most expensive. Why not make it you?
Mm.
And I got through it once and then I had to listen to it again. And I'll probably listen to it a third time. Plus, I've got your book now, so I'll read that as well. Very important. I'm a business owner and
Mhm.
you're an ambassador for small businesses, really, and a coach and had quite a bit of success yourself through your own business journey, right?
I have, yeah. It's in the blood. Bought my first business when I was 17, and pretty
Wow.
much, when you realize you're unemployable, Lee, the only option you have is to be an entrepreneur, right?
When you say unemployable, what do you mean by that? Because I can relate, but what's your
Yeah, it's and I say it a bit tongue in cheek.
yeah, yeah,
It's that piece where you like to be your own boss. You like
yeah,
to have control of your own destiny. You like the freedom I think that small business has. Even though I know they're the elements of we got to pay the bank, we got to pay the tax man, we got to pay wages, we've got to there's constraints. But I like being in control of my own destiny and I think in some respects, whenever I've dabbled in the employment space, I just find that it doesn't really suit me. It
yeah,
doesn't really work for me.
yeah. I agree. I went through hospitality and retail, and it took me a while to realize. And my dad was on this journey because I used to watch him as a young boy go through business. And I remember when he got out of the restaurant, he went and got employed through up in Cairns, actually at Ellis Beach. Got
Hmm.
employed there at one of the beachside pubs.
Hmm.
And he just didn't like it because he couldn't work for someone else. He wanted to run it himself and in his own way.
Yeah, yeah. It's a big shift in. I had a contract for a year recently with a corporate, a good friend of mine who owned it and it was a good thing, but it was like it was so different for how they operate, how they have to operate, the way things work, the structure. It just I don't know. I like the personal nature of business. I liked I'm probably a little bit old fashioned in that kind of sense as well, but I like the connection of people. I like to be able to make something, create something, sell it, and talk to the customer, and be a part of that all the way along. I find it amazingly rewarding. Um, but for me, it's a freedom, and it's that even though it's a freedom of choice, I can
Yeah.
work with whoever I want to or not. I can you live or die by your own kind of, decisions and your own wits and your own stuff. And I don't know, I think that there's something really fabulously challenging about that and fabulously rewarding in the same way.
Yeah. And I think the freedom piece is a big part of it. But then you look at it and go, yes, there's freedom. And maybe people don't see the other side of the business, which is high level of stress. And sometimes, you don't know when you're getting paid next and all that sort of reality too. So
Yeah,
there is
yeah.
a high sense of freedom. But I guess there's the reward to that as well when you're doing your own thing. And if it doesn't work, there's no reward. But if it works, there's a great reward, right?
Yeah, on many different levels.
Yeah.
There's something extraordinary about running a great business that's in demand, that people say fabulous things about, that you have high level of satisfaction, etc., as well as a financial return
Mm.
if you get it right. There's no capped kind of ceiling on that. But and you're right. It's that there's the ups and downs, and I think that's a part of it though. For me, if someone said to me, "What's the most important thing you've got to be able to what human trait or skill do you need to be successful in business?" I say all the time that you've got to get comfortable with uncertainty because there is no certainty in business to a
Yeah.
degree. We've been doing it for a long time. I'm pretty sure I know how much business I'll get next year. That's a little bit different. But when you're starting a business,
Yeah.
when things change, that maybe next week it's going to be hard to pay the wages. Maybe the week after there's going to be an economic thing where something shuts down in your community, and it's like all of a sudden people there's going to be name your crisis.
Yeah.
My little small business had no impact on the global financial crisis, Y2K, bird flu, COVID, rah rah, but it all impacts back on us. So we
Mm.
really have to get comfortable with that uncertainty. You know what it's like. You've been through that right over many, many years. It's the same thing.
I'm still learning how to get comfortable with it, to be honest.
Yeah. See, I,
And
I have got comfortable with it,
yeah,
and I find that that's when it gets a bit easier. Whereas in for me back in the earlier kind of part of my entrepreneurial journey, that was probably the most stressful part. And that's when I see people that leave the corporate environment to start a small business or consulting, advisory, or whatever it is, a pizza
yeah,
bar. Their biggest issue is that
yeah.
it's the uncertainty of it when they're so used to a structured, 2 year budget. This we've got that. It's all, we've got 2 million in the bank to spend on that, rah rah. Whereas in small business, it's kind of like put their open for business line out and hang on, and that's the craziness of it that takes a bit to get the hang of, I think.
And I suppose a lot of people leave that dream of pursuing their own entrepreneurial journey because of that uncertainty and challenge.
Yeah, completely. And look, as a coach, there's certainly times that I've had to say to people, I just don't think you should be in small business.
Hmm.
Uh,
Which
love
is
you
a great,
dearly,
courageous
but
thing to say to someone.
it is, and I am the most optimistic, positive person on the face of the planet, but uh, I'm not naive, and
Yeah.
I'm not gonna, my job in that role is to be honest with people, and it is just, you're seeing that uncertainty and that stress and all of that kind of challenge, kind of killing them. Stress wise, I had someone last week that I said, look, I honestly don't think small business is for you. She's lost 20 kilos. She looks terrible. She's drinking too much. She's not exercising, and it's purely stress related. And
Hmm.
of course, that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Who's going to want to buy from that person when she, feels so anxious, like she doesn't exude confidence and doesn't rah rah. So much easier. And she said, "Oh God, thank goodness you said that. I, I feel like a failure." And rah rah. I said, "Oh, you know, I failed the corporate world. Like it's, what the hell is failure? It's just a stepping stone, isn't it?" So sometimes we've got to know when, like, just like for me, the corporate world is not for me. For many people, small business is definitely not for them.
Not for them, yeah.
Mm.
Tell us a little bit about your journey because, I mean, reading your book, did you grow up in Cairns or you just started a business there?
No, I was born in Melbourne, so
Melbourne.
I'm an orphan. So my parents left myself and my sister when I was 6 months old, and my sister was 12 months old. And then we ended up, in a very long and strange kind of road in Perth, in and out of state care and all of that usual stuff. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, just one of those kind of childhoods, which is really strange actually, because there was no entrepreneurialness in that kind of upbringing. But we moved across to Sydney with some foster parents, and that's when I bought my first business when I was 17, going on 18, and
Yeah.
I bought a dive shop in Sydney, and I
In
always make the
Sydney.
joke, yeah, I bought a dive shop 30 kilometers from the ocean. Like you may question my business acumen when you think about that, um, but I did what a lot of people do, I think, Lee, in business. I knew how to dive, so the logical thing was to buy a business. It's like I know how to eat pizza, or I'll buy a pizzeria, or start a pizzeria. So
Yeah.
I had no freaking idea what I was doing, of course. So for me, I just set out, and I knew how to dive. I got my instructor ticket, I got my commercial dive ticket, so I could do both of those. But running the business was just it was a disaster for the first couple of years, and I didn't understand. I didn't know money. I got to know my bank manager because they popped by most mornings to give me the checks that I bounced the day before. Those kind of ridiculous stories. And then that's that's what changed for me,
Yeah.
was this slide down, down, down. And my whole thing was to run a dive shop. I had to make it the same as every other dive shop.
Yeah.
Like you got to have fishnet on the wall, you got to have plastic seahorses in it, you got to have 50 scuba cylinders on the floor to take up all the shop floor. And back then I was making $5 a scuba tank. And you
Wow.
don't sell a lot of them, yet for some reason there's this sense of you fill half your retail space. I believe that people wanted cheap crap gear because that's all they could afford, and blah blah blah. And I had a poverty mentality. I grew
Yeah.
up with that through my childhood. But the
Mm.
guy that I bought the dive shop from, he had a poverty mentality. So I learnt from him
Mm.
that again, people want cheap, people want this, rah, rah. And of course, it was just a business that was on a pathway to nowhere. And I didn't pay a lot of money for it, but it was like it was just a disaster. And I had this really transformational experience where a guy turned up one day, pulled up out front in a red Porsche, came in and said, "Oh, I'm a business coach." And a friend of his said that he needs to come and talk to me. And I said, "Oh, okay. What do you do?" He said, "Well, I can tell you where you're going wrong in your business." And I went, oh, okay, how much? And he said, oh, 5 grand, I think it was. And I said, mate, I'm sleeping in the dive shop because I haven't got enough money to put petrol in the truck to go back to my place that I'm renting that I haven't paid the rent on in 3 months. You know what I mean? Like I
There
haven't
you
got
go. Have
five
5 grand.
grand, for do that. Anyway, this weird thing happened. A couple of weeks later, I won 5 grand on Lotto in a syndicate. And of course, my logical thing was rather than pay my rent or do any of that kind of stuff. I rang him up and said, "Righto, come and tell me what I need to do." And this guy came and he said all he does is going to look at the business and just spend a couple of days hanging out and talking to people, blah blah blah. And anyway, he did that, and he came back to me after a few weeks with this list of things that he said I need to do, and it was all around. He said you got to stop trying to be like every other dive shop. You got to, put your dive instructors. They've got to put them in suits. They look like slobs. Get rid of the ponytails and the earrings. Be a boutique. Triple the price. Stop selling shit gear. Sell what gear do you use? I said,
Yeah.
the best. He said, so why are you selling cheap crap? And I said, well, because that's what everyone wants. He said, these are the stories we tell
Yeah,
ourselves.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Gave me this big long list of things that were all ridiculous. Ridiculous. There is no way you could be profitable and successful in a dive shop. He told me to get rid of the fishnet and the plastic seahorses and starfish, ridiculous kind of, things. And of course, I looked at this list and went, I've just wasted another 5 grand. Put it in the drawer, kept going, you know, debt, debt, debt,
Yeah.
you know, answering the phone call with a Mexican accent because everyone's ringing me, chasing me for money all the time, and blah blah blah, all of that stuff until I got desperate enough, and I remember I kind of opened the drawer on my desk and I was desperate, and I pulled out that one pager that he'd basically given me,
Mm.
and I looked at it and went, I got nothing to lose. I've lost everything. I'm in debt now. I'm going to go broke. I may as well do what he said. So I shut the shop and we scrimped, scraped, stole whatever I could find, got people to help to revamp this dive shop and did everything that he said in there. We turned it into a boutique. We got some carpet. We got, there was a construction site down the road that we could borrow some stuff from. We got these images on the wall. I got bad suits from St. Vinny's that I could get my dive instructors to wear. We became a boutique destination, got rid of all the cheap crap gear, found a dive gear supply that I bought my gear from that was a really great brand who backed us. But and he knew that I was in trouble and he was very nervous about doing that. So he didn't sell me the gear. He'd lent gear in there that was still his and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, the big thing that I didn't really notice when this guy gave me this list, but there was a thing at the bottom and it said, Andrew, someone's got to be the most expensive. It may as well be you. But if you're going to be the most expensive, you got to be the best.
Yeah.
And for some reason, I didn't see that when I first got, and that really hit me. And that's when I went, right, from that day on, everything we do has to be extraordinary. Someone comes in with an issue with a regulator. You don't ask, you don't do how complaints handled now. You say, sorry about that, take that, and you give them a brand new one. Our dive boat, our gear, our school gear. I got rid of all the cheap crap in the school gear and I used the best gear available in our dive school. And we charged 3 times more what anyone else was charging at the time. Got ready, opened the doors, and went, oh, this is a disaster. This is I just it went against every grain in my body that everything that was on there was just seemed so wrong. Opened the door and it just boomed from that. People were coming
Yeah.
from all over Sydney. People going, oh my God, this is great. People would drive from Cronulla to Hornsby to buy a $200 wetsuit. and it wasn't a giant shop. It was a little shop, but people, word of mouth, but all this stuff changed. And it's so interesting for me
Mm.
that then really started that thing. And that's why this is a book that in reality has been 40 years in the making,
Yeah.
because then I've seen this undercharging, this blah 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 that we'll talk about more,
Yeah.
kind of go through. So anyway, after the dive shop, I did everything from selling encyclopedias door to door in Tasmania, which is part of the reason why I'm back in Tasmania now.
Yeah.
I moved to Cairns then via again Western Australia and a bit of time in exploration, and I got a job putting in pontoons on the Great Barrier Reef, and I got decompression sickness. And then
Yeah.
on a job, yeah, and I was working for a big Japanese company at the time, and then they said, "Look, you got a big mouth. We'll put you into sales and marketing." And I really took to that eventually, and next thing I was kind of traveling the world, great autonomy, great freedom, a credit card and a man. The my brief was go and find us customers. So it was amazing, and that kind of freedom was extraordinary. That's the one job that I could do that I love because I was traveling first class all over the world and staying in great
Yeah.
hotels and selling. Not that hard to deal with. Then after that, I did that for 5 years, and then I came back to Cairns and I started a marketing company,
Yeah.
and I loved working with small business owners. That was always still my passion. And then I just really noticed, Lee, that a lot of the time I'm having the same conversations, the same issues with small business owners, etc. And I started writing these fact sheets, which is like how to do a sales call, how to do a brochure, how to get, how to create an offering, all that kind of jazz, and people could come in and grab them. And but I was same all the time. And I
Mm.
thought, oh, you know what? If I wrote another 50, if I had 100 of these sheets, I could probably put them in a book and call it 101 Ways to Market Your Business. And that's what I did. And I floated it by a publishing company in Sydney, and they loved it. They published it, and it was hugely successful. And then I published another 11 books with them and other publishers. So now I've got 14 best-selling books,
14
sold in
best-selling books. Yeah.
in the world. Yeah. So that's the short version of that
What a
that
journey.
journey. Yeah, interesting, isn't it? I'd never imagined being a writer. I never
Yeah.
never never entered my scope. Never imagined being a business owner or an entrepreneur. It's funny how life, takes us down those roads sometimes, hey?
What are you looking back to your childhood years, your teenage years before you bought the business? What in that period of time do you look back at and go, that's why I am this way? Is there like I just think back to my childhood often and go, that's why I'm like this, and that's why I do this, and that's
Mm.
why I value this, you know?
I think the childhood that I had was uh was difficult, and there was a lot of violence in it. There was a lot of neglect. There was a lot of stuff in there that kind of shaped you. And I certainly, there really wasn't any of that entrepreneurial kind of role
No.
model or any of that stuff that I would look at. But what it did do, it really, it taught me to be really independent,
Yeah.
and I was independent from
Yeah.
five, and that independence, even with things like, with a childhood like that, particularly when you become a teenager, you associate with other kids that are like that, and you all of a sudden, you're breaking into houses, you're stealing cars, you begin a bit of a criminal kind of pathway
Journey, yeah.
because it's, that's what's there, and it, right or wrong, it's what evolves, drug taking, all that
Yeah.
kind of stuff. Um, but I think the independence that I
Yeah.
got from a young age also is what gave me the strength of character to break away from that. And I had a pivotal moment in my life where it
Mm.
was a Friday afternoon. The guys that I was hanging out with, we, things were escalating. It was petty stuff before. It was like the petty crime. It was the petty drugs. It was the petty alcohol. It was, it was that stuff that a 15-year-old, 16-year-old kid gets into. but
Yeah.
I could feel the escalation. It was getting a bit more violent. It was getting the drugs were, instead of smoking dope now, it was heroin, and LSD was starting to, come into our group. There was more, the guys were starting to carry, knives and things. You
Yeah.
just see where this is
Yeah.
going.
Mm.
And I remember standing at the end of this driveway. I was just at that stage sleeping on someone's couch. So I didn't really have a home, and I just stood at the end of the driveway, and I just went. I had a really an epiphany,
Yeah.
and it was like, you know, there's two paths, Andrew. Go left or go right. If you go left, you get in the car tonight, you choose that life, and that's your lot. Or you go right and you get the
Yeah.
hell out of there. And I
Mm.
literally, it hit me like a bolt of lightning, and I literally went back in, grabbed my bag, and I got out of there, and I hitchhiked to Townsville. Just got out of Sydney. Just got,
Yeah. Right.
um, and
Townsville.
yeah, I know, right? I had this view of I'll become a marine biologist or do something, and you know, but I got out, and I think that comes back to the question that you're asking there, Lee.
Mm.
That strength of character has always helped me as an entrepreneur. I kind of live life to the beat of my own drum. I like to, I like to be my own person and to be my own man, and
Yeah.
that's played through.
Definitely, I can see the independence shining through there, and that journey obviously builds a hard level of resilience, I imagine, which is
Yeah,
characteristic of an entrepreneurial sort of journey.
yeah, that's right. And I think that also when I buying the dive shop, as out of my depth as I actually was, I think it was the first time that I really felt any kind of self-respect. You know,
Right.
I was really good at teaching people to dive. I was really good as a commercial diver. I could, I'd be in the middle of the night under the bottom of $100,000, container ship off the, coast of Sydney, doing stuff for Lloyd's of London or something, as a, then as an 18 or a 19-year-old kind of, like I was the youngest master instructor in Australia, with a certifying body then at, rah, rah. And these were things that gave me self-respect that I had achieved that I kind of, up until then, was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. But also just that interaction of people, like
Hmm.
the people would come in and go, oh, can I talk to the owner of the business and say, oh, well, that's me. And they go, how old are you? And it was like, that I felt that there was respect, to me, and I think I really liked that. I
Yeah.
really
I
that
imagine.
that
Yeah.
that helped me feel better as a human being, and it made me feel, much better. And I took it seriously as well. I didn't, um, probably because the first time I'd ever felt it, and it took a while to get used to that. But then I so appreciated that respect, and I felt that I had to really honor that as well, and take great care of my customers. And you know I learned about professionalism, and all of that stuff. It was almost, someone said to me, it's like joining the army. When if you haven't got, parameters and guidance, a lot of people really take to it because of the structure, the camaraderie, etc. And I found that, the camaraderie of my team, the work that you do, the teaching people. Teaching
Yeah.
people is always a lovely way to the student teacher kind of relationship. So there was a lot of things there, and it's really kind of stayed with me, I think, for the rest of my life. That I treat business very seriously. Um, I'm a teacher. I love teaching people things, and yeah, that entrepreneurial space gives me. It's a place that I fit,
Yeah.
and I think we often are trying to find that in so many different ways.
It's been a 40-year journey, would you say? Is it 40 years roughly?
Oh, over
A bit
40
longer?
now.
Over
Yeah,
40?
yeah.
So when you look at success, and I know you speak on a lot of topics, and one of them is success. How have you defined success in that journey, and how has that evolved?
Yeah, and it's a really great question, Lee, isn't it? And I do talk a lot about this these days because, even for myself, I think, uh, that all too often we get caught up a bit in building a business that we think other people want us to build.
Yeah.
And it's that sense of it's got to be a giant business. It's got to be it's got to be this. It's got to be that. And I started to go that line of wanting to build an empire, and it was really interesting for me. I started to realize that I didn't actually want an empire.
Mm.
I don't want to have 1,000 people. I don't want $1 billion. I don't want any of that kind of stuff. And I know it's easy for people to go, oh yeah, but when you're later in your career and money is not so much of an issue and all that kind of stuff, and go, well, yeah, but I made these decisions a long time ago. But
Mm.
I it's you got to, in my view, success is really knowing what kind of life you want, and then
Yeah.
building a business that's going to help you to have that life. For me, I've been a digital kind of nomad, for lack of a better term, for 25 years. Where I live, this whole living on the end of a laptop and thing. I've done that forever because that was one of
Yeah.
my priorities. I want to be able to live anywhere. As long as I'm within 15 minutes of an airport and I've got an internet connection, then that works for me. That's my parameters. But I think we have this perception, and a story that I'll share about that with you,
Yeah.
Lee. Um, about 10 years ago, oh, a bit longer actually, probably 14 years ago, I wrote a book called The Me Myth. And it was a book
Mm.
about empathy. And it's really kind of my story in many ways. And it was published by a company called Simon and Schuster. Big publisher, great organization, and published in Australia. But they said, we'd love you to come to America and talk to us about publishing your book over here. So I went to New York and I had a meeting with them, and they explained, saying, "Oh, okay, look, if you do it over here, you've got to move over here for a year, and that's on you. You got to pay for that." And my business was going well in Australia, but I'd
Yeah.
kind of have to leave that to go over there and do it. And of course, and they said, "We'll publish it, and we'll help with media and all that kind of stuff." But who knows? Is it going to work? Is it not? You got to take that gamble. It's up to you. And I love the idea, of moving to America. It was bigger, and it was that whole element of the American market. I'd done a lot of work in America in the past. I was really comfortable with America, and I kind of, oh, that sounds, yeah, it sounds great.
Yeah.
Anyway, I was stopping in San Francisco on the way back. A friend of mine is Brendan Burchard, and well-known kind of entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And I said, "Hey, Brendan, I'm coming back through." He said, "I'm doing a program for a couple of days. Come along and do that, and we'll catch up." So I did the program, went to San Fran, did it, and we caught up for a meal. And we just kind of chatting. He's saying, "So what are you doing in the States?" And I said, "Oh, I'm moving here, and my book's going to get published over here, and I'm moving here." And he just looked at me and he said, "Why the hell do you want to do that?" And he's Mr. Positivity,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
I and,
Yeah.
and I'm kind of going, uh, because it's bigger. I really didn't have
That's,
an answer
that's
to
a good
that.
question. Yeah.
And it was really thought provoking. And he said, "Okay, so you want to come over and you want to do what you do in Australia, you want to do it over in America." And he said, "Please give me permission to tell you the reality of what that looks like." I went, "Yeah, by all means." And he said, "Okay, so right at the moment, you do a lot of speaking, and he said, so, you get your speaking, however that comes, direct or through, over here, it's all through bureaus." And he
Yeah.
said, "So you go to a bureau." And he said, "So what's your point of difference? You're an Australian and you've got then, I think it's about 10 books." And he said they would have 500 authors on their books that have got probably 100 books, under their realm. So, pecking order, comes into play. He said being Australian is no longer the throw a shrimp on the barbecue thing. And in
Yeah.
fact, it's not necessarily going to open the doors that it would have back when I was kind of initially doing that. He
Hmm.
said, "At the moment, what do you like with travel?" And I said, "Oh, he said, you travel Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, a bit of Southeast Asia and a bit of stuff internationally." And I said, "Yeah, but my kind of day job is Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne."
Yeah.
And he said, "So, do you like traveling?" I go, it's part of the gig." He said, "So move to America and all of a sudden you're going to be traveling between 50 cities." Now, and every time you travel in America, it's a day, and this was before September 11th, right? So, where it's got more complicating. He said, so be prepared to spend your life at an airport. He said, then the third thing is you run your own events. He said, in San Francisco this weekend, there are 70 entrepreneurial events.
Yeah, wow.
So
Mm.
he said, and he just listed all these things. And he said, so you want
Yeah.
to come and do all of that and give up your business in Australia, which you've built, been building as the author and speaker. And he said, yet you're in Australia. He said, where you are a big fish in a little pond, where you know everyone, or you're one, you can get to anyone. You've got an incredible reputation. You get all the business you want. You're on the gateway to Southeast Asia, and he said, if I was you, I would just I would never leave Australia,
Mm.
to do this and go from what's easy to what's hard. And you know what? It
Put it in
was,
perspective. Yeah.
I came back, emailed Simon and Schuster, said, sorry guys, I'm not prepared to do that. I've got a great business here. And I tell you, that actually put me on a great pathway, because
Yeah.
that's when I really stopped yearning for oh, if I go to America, I could be big, I could do this, I could be another Tony Robbins. Right? I don't want to be another Tony Robbins. I'm not Tony Robbins. I don't want to be on the road 5 days a week. I've been there, I've done that.
Yeah.
It sounds fabulous. It is not. You
Yeah.
know, um, rah rah. And my life as an author and a speaker, I got such clarity and focus. That was the turning point for me. That was this magnificent crossroad for me that changed my life. And
Mm.
uh
Yeah.
and it was such and a couple of weeks later, I got this incredible contract in Australia with a British-based company, teaching people how to write books, which became this transformational part of my business. And now I've gone on and taught 1,000 people how to write their first book. All these other things that just kind of evolved from that.
Involved. Yeah.
And it's almost when I stopped yearning for something imaginary and I defined what I wanted, or I actually had someone else define it for me,
Yeah.
really,
Yeah.
that I kind of went, oh, be the biggest fish in the smallest pond. You own the lane. Why the hell do you want to go into another one unless you're really over it? And I said, no, I'm
Yeah.
not. I love I'd just be doing that in America.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know what I mean? And it's like, yeah, wow. So,
Really highlighted. Do you help other people identify their values to align with that definition of success?
absolutely. Yeah, I do, because I think that most of us have got an idea in our head, and that's okay. I don't think there's a right or a wrong, but is it their idea of success, or is it their perception of how they think others want them to do
Wanted
it?
to do it. Yeah.
And that's the challenge, mate. That's the one that I see. And the worst part about that is when I see people going, "Oh, I'm I'm a failure because I didn't build an empire, or I'm a failure because it's like, hell no. We live in a world now where you should be able to define and build the business that you want, however you want it, now more than ever.
Yeah.
I think it's
Yeah.
just you've got
Okay.
to know what that looks like for you.
Yeah. How do you help people identify those values and what that looks like? Because, we're surrounded by, like you said, we're surrounded by social media and what these people are doing and the Brendon Burchards of the world, looking at this because, oh, that's what I want to be like. How do we get grounded to really understand our values and how we really want to live our life?
Yeah, another really fabulous question. I think that a lot of the time you do need to be able to take that step back and
Yeah.
kind of go, right. I need to really think long and hard. Like I was on that path, but I hadn't really thought about it. I hadn't really, what does that really look like for me if I follow
Yeah.
this, and when having someone actually honestly define what it would look like, that became very helpful,
Yeah.
because I hadn't imagined any of that. I hadn't thought it through. So we fall in love with the idea, like, oh, I'm going to build a business and I'm going to sell it for $5 billion and, go and live in Ibiza. And you look at that and kind of go, that all sounds beautiful. Are you really prepared to do what that takes? To build an organization like that, we all know there is room in your life for nothing else. If that's your obsession, then that's what you got to be completely focused and obsessed, and you got to be
Yeah.
prepared to work your ass off, 100-hour weeks. Like, there's no 40-hour week in that, at least.
Yeah.
You got to, and so I think we've got to take time out, step back and go, what is the reality of that? And what would that look like? I, I think we've also got to say, hey, you know, what matters, what's important,
Mm.
to me, like, and that's like, what are your values? For me, it's really important that I work with people that I enjoy working with and I respect and
Yeah.
that respect me. It's important that I have the freedom of, flexibility, around that, the freedom to be able to work from where I want
Yeah.
to work, etc. Um, I I have a kind of a check for me is that every day I look at my calendar, and if it doesn't make me smile, as in, oh, I'm catching up with Lee today, oh, I'm talking to Bill, oh, I'm doing a webinar, oh, I'm doing this,
Yeah.
then there's stuff on there that shouldn't be on there.
Right.
My calendar has to make me smile, and you know that in its own right is important. I'm
That's
doing the
really
things
important. Yeah.
that matter. What does my lifestyle want to look like?
Mm.
For me, I love wild places, wilderness. Another reason that I choose to live in Tasmania. Over for a long time, I take a week off every 5 or 6 weeks and go to a wild place. Go somewhere, go to shack
Yeah.
up in the east
Yeah.
coast of Tasmania, go and you know what I mean? Like, and I've done that forever. People used to laugh at me in Cairns, going, "What? You got to escape the stress of Cairns," And it was like, you go, "Yeah, but that part of my lifestyle is
Yeah.
really important for me. Dying with $100 million in the bank is not. You
Yeah.
know, the other thing is like being able to say, well,
Really good point.
I want to be able to make enough money. What is that for? Well, because I've got my organizations that I want to support, like, okay, that, so, there's a fiscal element to it. I don't want to live in a cave and pick fluff out of my belly button and do transcendental meditation 24 hours a day, but I know the lifestyle that I want. I know
Yeah.
what kind of revenue I want to have. I know who organizations I want to support. I know the type of people that I want to work with.
Mm.
I know that the work I do has to be teaching, coaching, that draws on my skills and so, you go around the wheel and you go, well, that's what that really means. Then you go, well, okay, I want all of those things. What does my business need to look like? If a big thing in there is saying, well, okay, I want freedom and I want this. Well, if you've got a business that's going to tie you down and require you to be there 12 hours a day and, not be selective in
Mm.
terms of who you deal with, well, it's not going to fit. It's
Not
like
gonna
if
lie.
having a family, young family is really important and you want to open a nightclub, it's probably not going to work, right? Like long term, because you're going to be there till 4 o'clock. How's that
Yeah.
work for a young fan?
How does that line? Yeah.
And I think that we need to take the time out, Lee, to really think about those things and go, okay, so once I've defined all of that, then I've got to make sure my business fits. And what I do find is often when people do that thinking, they realize that the business they've got isn't what they want,
Yeah.
and it's never going to work because of that.
Yeah. Makes
And they
sense.
grow to resent it. Their heart is not in it, etc. And it's a big moment when that actually happens.
How many
Because
years did that take for you to come to that? I mean, you said it was it 2011 when you had that chat with Brendan.
yeah, 2010. Mm.
So was that like halfway through? Like, because I like to put it in perspective because I think a lot of people sometimes think, things are going to, particularly in this day and age, we want it now,
Mm.
we want it to happen now, right? And the journey of success sometimes takes 10 years, 20 years more
Yeah.
even.
I believe it takes 10 years to build a successful business, um, regardless,
Yeah.
because there's financial success.
Yeah.
We get that. Like, you can start a business tomorrow, Lee, and it can be, profitable within a month. Like, we kind of get that there's a speed to that, but it's very different to have a business that's going to be around in 2 years. It's very different to have a business that's going to be able to weather out the ups and downs of the world that we live in.
Mm.
That's a sustainable business, one that can adapt, evolve, pivot. That dreaded pivot word. But that's what it's all about. We saw
Yeah.
during COVID, right? How many businesses went bust overnight simply because there's no robustness in them. There's no financial fat, all of that kind of stuff. So, um, So a solid, substantial, business of substance is one that can write out all of that stuff.
Yeah.
So I look at it and go, well, for me, I look at my business journey as an author and a speaker. If that's
Yeah.
what my business is now, it really started in 2000. So that's when my first book came out. So 25 years.
Yeah.
So you're right. At about that 10-year mark, I had, you know, I had books, I had a reputation, I had a bit of a brand. I was on that pathway um to
Yeah.
getting there.
Interesting.
Hmm.
It's for a lot of people, and you just sort of touched on this in your talk just now. When do you know when it's something that we shouldn't pursue and something that we're just not pursuing because of the fear factor, right? Because you've obviously made plenty of those moments in your career, I'm assuming, where you've just moved towards it because you had this big level of fear. And you talk about it, I think, a lot is,
Mm.
going towards that because sometimes that's a sign of something that you do need to do. But
Yeah.
then sometimes we use that as an excuse of, oh, maybe that's just not for me because this is how I really want to live my life. You know what I mean? Like,
Hmm. Yeah. It's I think a big part of business success, you know, is really that bit about understanding yourself, isn't it?
yeah,
And it's like, as I was talking about before, what do I want? What do I really want? What does all of that kind of stuff look like? That's one element, but it is also kind of knowing and being able to be honest with yourself about your own kind of habits. What do you do? What don't you do? Like I've worked with one person I think of in particular, and I look at it and go, they're stuck in this endless kind of loop, and they need to kind of do something significant to change it. They're really good at planning a business, getting a logo, getting a brand, setting up a website, starting it, but then that's it. They
yeah,
can't do the next part, which is business development, selling stuff, kind of growing, doing that. So they start a business, put it on the side, start another business because it's easy to do that now. Put it on the side, start
yeah,
another
yeah,
business,
yeah, yeah.
and
I
never
get that.
actually do anything because of the fear of failure. All
Yeah,
right. As soon as I launch this and start to promote it, and what if it doesn't work? That comes back on
holds them
me.
back, right?
I see other people now that are kind of going, well, I've been doing this for 5 years and it's not working. And it's almost like they get to a stage of going, oh, but I'm doing everything. I hear this line all the time, oh, I'm doing everything. And I'm going, if you're doing everything, it'll be working, right?
Yeah,
So what aren't you doing? And you
yeah,
go, oh yeah, like say for example, it's in a coaching space. So
yeah,
you're creating content. Oh yeah, but I do this kind of, it's very, conditional. So you're doing videos, you're engaging with your oh no, I don't want to do videos. Okay. So once we figure out all the things that you don't want to do, okay, the magic lies in the stuff that you're avoiding, right?
right.
And your answer to why your business isn't working is in the stuff that you're avoiding. Like the person setting
Good.
up all those business, why
Yeah,
aren't any of them successful? Because you don't go out and sell. You don't have a plan for what happens after it's launched, and you avoid that because of fear of failure. So, so just like, are there things? And you're right. I've made plenty of mistakes. God, anyone in business is, for any amount of time, has made plenty of mistakes. But I have a philosophy about them. Whether it be I do business with someone, they rip me off, I lose money. I can be bitter and twisted about it, or I can learn from it.
yeah,
Like every time I lose money because of something, I just put it in my University of Life account and
yeah,
go, great, I learned a fabulous lesson there.
yeah,
Or what, if, the magic is in the work that we're avoiding, what am I avoiding? Like, and I think this comes back to that point, Lee, of being able to have honest conversations with yourself. Why isn't it working? Well, because the market, because of this, because of that, most of the time
yeah,
that's BS. Like it's. I'm not saying it always is BS, and of course, tough economic times, people are buying less Maseratis. If you're a
yeah.
Maserati dealer, right? But a lot of the time, the stories that we tell ourselves are the
Mm,
things that bring us undone. And the
yeah,
three biggest stories relate to our own self-worth, the self-worth we've learnt or value stories from people that were influential when we were growing up, or business
yeah,
people. And then the third one is what everyone else is saying, what they're saying.
Yeah.
No one's buying, no one's doing this, no one's doing that. So you roll all of that in together,
Yeah.
and I think that success really does come from this whole being able to kind of hold that mirror up to yourself, like
Yeah.
Brendan did with me, and
Yeah.
sat me on my butt and shocked me into going, hang on, rethink this. It was the greatest gift that I had was that moment with him.
Mm.
Now, I might have gone to America and been hugely successful, right?
But is that what you really
But
wanted?
is that what
Mm.
I really wanted?
Yeah.
You
And
know,
sometimes it does take a coach and this is the great thing about coaches and mentors, right?
if they're good,
Is
absolutely.
if they're good to have people highlight that, what aren't you doing or what is not aligning with your actual values and how can
Yeah,
you shift that? Because I think there's a need to have purpose and there's a need to have fulfillment in life. And often we don't have that because we're pursuing things that really don't mean much to us.
yeah, and it's a hollow feeling, isn't it?
It is.
It's hollow feeling, it's you also know when you're on the right path because it happens a lot easier.
Yeah.
Like things work easier, and and that's the other point that I do believe now, and I'm seeing this happening a lot, Lee.
Mm.
That when I'm presenting, when I'm talking to people, when I'm coaching, is that is it really that people are saying, you know what? I don't want to build an empire. What I want to do is I want to move to Mullumbimby, buy 50 acres, get 100 cows, and I'm going to make camembert cheese. And every weekend at the market, we're going to sell 1,000 rounds of the best camembert cheese in the world. And we're going to, slow it down. But we want to do that, bring up kids, have a great, go, wow, I love hearing stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've
It's
got
good.
a friend of mine who makes this incredible niched kind of furniture, and he sells walking sticks that he makes for $85,000. You can buy a walking stick from a mobility store for $20. All right, he's the and again, like friend of mine and I talk about in the book, Peter Lick, an amazing photographer, and
Yeah.
you'd know Licky from your Cairns days probably. Then he used to be my neighbour. That's how I met him. And now he's got this amazing. He always wanted to build an empire. He's the exact example of a guy who wanted an empire, was prepared to do what it took, and built the empire. Now he lives in Greece, travels around on a yacht. So there's this. What do you really want? But
Yeah.
one thing I know is that if you can define that and charge what you're worth,
Yeah.
then the struggle becomes less, and that
Yeah.
kind of brings us full circle to that whole. That's why with my dive shop, that whole charging what I'm worth and being okay with that, changed everything for me and has kind of gone through my entire life. And that's where I see now the problem is not the business or the vision. It's just that they don't charge what they're worth.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so the struggle is always going to be there.
And I think you got to stop shit talking yourself, and you
Yeah,
talk about that. Understanding who you really are and what it's all about, because it's easy to go, okay, well, I'm just going to triple my salary by charging more.
yeah,
But
yeah,
if you're not truly worth it and it's not really aligned with your true values and skills and talents, then is someone going to pay it, right? Or
yeah,
if you're not
exactly.
actually providing that level of service or experience, is someone really going to pay it? So
You got to
you have to be
deliver.
worth it, don't you? You have to deliver, right?
Well, the whole point here is someone's got to be the most expensive. It may as well be you. But if you're going to be the most expensive, you've got to be the best.
Yeah,
It's like we're not going to pay $100 for a Big Mac,
yeah,
because we know that it's worth whatever a Big Mac costs. It's not $100,
yeah,
you know. But there are people now in the world who will pay for for quality.
yeah,
We all know that. We all know, we've all bought something online from Temu, and or Amazon or whatever, and go, well, that doesn't quite live up to what it is, and I've just wasted $50 on a piece of crap. That applies through most things, and the
yeah.
world is
We're more
shifting.
inclined to pay a premium for great service or pay a premium for a great product, right?
Absolutely, more than and more people
More than
are
before.
heading into that space. Yeah,
It's
always
interesting how
been
that's
price
changing,
driven.
right?
I see
Yeah,
it changing a great deal, and I see businesses that are applying that principle, going make a greater experience, make it more, make it more memorable, make it more differential, embrace what makes you unique. Do all of those things. Um, that's our greatest opportunity in business. Those people that are able to do all of that, and I see that working across all industries. Doesn't really matter what it is, embrace your unique, and it's interesting because now we've got this great adaptation thing happening through technology,
Mm.
and that redefinition of value is coming into the space. Like if I can use AI to kind of create that, well, what the hell do I need you for? You know what I mean? So we've
Yeah.
got to say, well, where do we fit in that?
Yeah.
It's very interesting. Like I'm aware we have got a lot of time, but very briefly,
Yeah.
working with the Australian Surveying Institute, and they're kind of saying, well, what the problem is now is that surveyors, their whole thing was, well, we have two blokes and a dog out in the bush, surveying a block. That's what our business was all around. That can all get done now with tech. Drones, technology can get done from Sydney. Surveying is got a whole lot more tech, and they're saying, well, we've got no value. We won't be around. What it means is that surveyors now have got to become like specialist surgeons, like specialist doctors. Two people read an X-ray, and the better one will give more insight into that so that they're more valued. Same with the surveyor now. Their value has to come from how they interpret the data and what
Yeah.
advice they give to the clients. Whereas before, it was all about just getting the data.
Right. Yeah.
So now they can add more value,
Positive.
and they're using this. This is in their training system to say we've got to learn to redefine our value because technology has now made that a transaction, but our expertise is not. And they've got better businesses. They need less staff. They don't need two blokes and a dog out in the bush. It's actually building a better business.
Yeah.
But the old fear factor hangs on of like, but how do we define ourselves? How do we fit if we're all about our qualities in the actual guy with the theodolite?
Mm.
So and I think there's a lot of businesses that are like that now. They've got to go, well, okay, AI is now transactionalizing that. So how do we offer that exceptional value? How do we
Yeah.
differentiate? And that's coming through in accounting, legal, a lot of service-based industries as well. And go, okay, you got to find your place in there.
Yeah, yeah, it's a big
That's the
shift, isn't
future.
it? And it's a
Mm,
really important thing to be aware of right now because I use AI quite a bit now. Not as
me
much as
too.
I probably could either, but
Mm.
it's interesting to see how quickly it's developing and how quickly that's going to shift things for any industry.
Imagine in 5 years.
Yeah,
And I think COVID started it. There was so much stuff
yeah,
that we
absolutely.
we couldn't do. Do you remember that? Like I
Yeah,
couldn't do a teleconferencing with my vet or my financial planner for some reason, or all these people. All of a sudden, COVID came along. I could do a Zoom call with my baker up the road to get advice. Like they would do.
and people accepted it, didn't they, through that period? They've just come to go, yep, actually, no, we accept Zoom calls now. We accept this way to do business.
Exactly. Whereas before it was all like too hard, and you go, well, shows that if there's enough demand, desire, reason, etc., the too hard kind of changes. So
I think you talk, and I'll keep going for a little bit if you're okay with it,
sure,
but
sure, yeah, yeah,
we yeah, you talk about these changes and being excellent, and I think it comes back time and time again to human intelligence and people.
yes,
Right? We've got to connect with people. We've got to make them feel good. And you talk a lot about stories, and it's not only
Mm,
the stories we tell ourselves that define our values and the direction we're going, but the stories you tell others to connect and make that feeling as well.
huge, huge.
Yeah,
For me in my business, my point of differentiation, because give it a few years. Human coaching, AI coaching, it'll be a video of me that you'll be on the coaching session.
yeah,
It'll be interacting. It'll be that point, and that's just that's the reality of what it's going to be
mm,
like. But I look at it and go, I am a huge believer in the value of human intelligence, and I have a stamp made up now which says this presentation is 100% created by human intelligence, and human skills. And I agree with you that that's our opportunity now to differentiate ourselves, but also the ability to storytell, which AI is unable to do and will not be able to do to create
mm,
my unique stories. And I think that we have a funny view about storytelling. I think we undervalue it. I think
yeah,
storytelling is this extraordinary tool to fix address any kind of issue, challenge, opportunity in our business. And again, it's a big topic of mine that I'm doing more and more work on. And I think I'm going to write a book about it actually,
Yeah.
is how to use storytelling to address anything from attracting the right staff to dealing with, dramatic changes in your business. And I'm a huge fan of storytelling. I do a lot of storytelling in my speaking, in my writing, as you would see in the book. Um, but it's strategically, and,
How do you
and
tell better stories without coming across as a phony?
well, detail.
Yeah.
So you got to be good at being able to frame. Why am I sharing this story?
Yeah.
A bit of background. Like I could talk about, I came across a restaurant chain in Japan that had this issue. Whereas you add detail. 5 years ago, I was on a study tour of Japan with a client of mine, and we met a CEO of a restaurant group there that had been operating for 200 years and they'd reached this incredible critical timeline. You know what I mean? By
Yeah.
adding that extra detail, all of a
Yeah.
sudden, it makes it a much more engaging story.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's a key thing that we've actually got to learn how to tell stories
Yeah.
again.
Yeah. Yeah.
We've lost a bit of the art of that, the storytelling ability, and there's so much to
How do you
storytelling.
how do
Mm,
you find people react when you, or maybe just in a personal one-on-one situation where you start to tell a story and maybe they've asked you a simple question that you could answer quickly,
mm.
but instead you tell a story about answering that question.
Uh, I guess for me sometimes, like I wouldn't tell a story in that situation because it feels a bit weird, or it feels like not that role. But I like to frame it like I've kind of done
Yeah.
with you a bit here, Lee. Say, let me share a quick story about that, or do you mind if I share a story that's an example of that?
Yeah.
I find that if you ask them
Okay.
for
That's a
for
good point.
permission,
Hmm.
that they're never going to say no. Like, on that side, but it feels less like you're kind of lecturing them or teaching them.
Pitching or lecturing. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah. But it's a really interesting question because I look I'm a storyteller. I tell stories all day long on various things, but I also I'm very cautious that I'm just that there's a relevance to the
Yeah.
story.
Got to
It's
be relevant.
appropriate to share it at that time. I've got a
Yeah.
client of mine who's a storyteller, but he lacks those filters, and so he bursts in the story. But it's like, dude, that's not where we're at.
Hmm.
That's a story to showcase an experience you had, but it serves no purpose here in the conversation. So I think you've got to have a bit of emotional intelligence around that, Lee. Yeah, I've definitely seen it when it's not done well, and I have to be careful of that. I don't become like that. Because I like telling stories. So
But you got to write a book about it.
yeah, that's
Um,
an interesting. It's an interesting point, and I've been umming on that. So I'm just going to make a note of that.
you
I
should.
I got a
I
list
think
of
it's
books.
amazing. I just went to a conference where they talked about, well, a couple of people talked about storytelling, and the speakers that I really engaged with were great at storytelling as well. So I think it's very powerful. And if you think about, like you've been talking about the stories we tell ourselves in our head and how much that defines our life, and so how much that's impacting. If you're good at storytelling to others, then you're going to have that impact as well.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
40 years of entrepreneurial experience. What's one of the biggest lessons you can provide us?
I think the biggest the quote that I'm such a fan of, and I use it all the time, and I'm sure some of your listeners will have had it, is by Alvin Toffler, and it's the illiterate of the 21st century aren't those who can't read or write, but those who can't learn, unlearn, and relearn. and
Mm,
and, and I think that constant adaptation and evolution has been something that's kept me relevant and successful for a long period of time. It's like I never sit on my laurel. I'm constantly learning. I'm embracing new. I'm not the old. When I was a boy, we used to do it like that kind of element. That doesn't
yeah,
really work anymore.
yeah,
Um, and so yeah, I'm a very big believer in learn, unlearn, and then relearn.
never complacent.
Yeah.
I love it. Good way to wrap it up. What's the best way people can reach out to you, Andrew?
AndrewGriffiths.com.
Yeah.
That's that. Facebook, I'm
Yeah.
there. LinkedIn, wherever your audience may be. I'm pretty easy to track down. I'd love anyone to you want to reach out. The books are all on Amazon, all that kind of stuff. It's easy to find. Audible, as you said, you listen. Amazing how popular audiobooks are these days. Hey,
Oh,
the
I love it. Yeah.
number one question any author will get asked these days is it available on Audible?
Yeah.
Like that shows that change. So if you're an author and your books aren't on Audible, you're missing out.
You read your own book, didn't you?
I did. Yeah, I
Yeah.
believe that's important. I got a pretty good voice for
Yeah,
that.
you do.
If some people, if you've got not a good voice to listen to
Get
for
someone
four
else
or
to do
five
it.
hours,
Yep.
yeah, pay an actor. Pay someone else to do it. So I've been asked to do other people's audiobooks, but I go, it's like, no, I think I keep my voice for my books.
Yeah, that's really good. Guys, reach out. I'll stick all the links in the show notes at thehiddenwhy.com.
Thank
Andrew
you.
Griffiths, again, thank you so much for taking the time out.
Yeah, thank you, Lee. Really, really great to connect and appreciate it. And thanks for the insightful questions as well. I mean, I do a lot of interviews, a lot of podcasts, and I love it when I have a host who's really, thought provoking for me as well. Like that. That makes it really engaging and gives me book ideas during the interview.
I'll get the first copy of that next one.
You do, mate. You do. Absolutely. Good on you, Lee.
Guys, check it out, thehiddenwhy.com. Live more fully, have more meaning, find more joy. We'll talk soon.